headlines and on to some breaking news we're tracking at the top of this hour. US President Donald Trump has now laid out the final terms of a US-backed Gaza peace proposal, putting the onus entirely on Hamas to accept. He has stated that an agreement must be reached with Hamas by Sunday evening at 6 p.m. Washington, D.C. local time. The U.S. president has further stated that the Gaza peace deal offers a path for de-escalation and has said that the deal spares the lives of all remaining Hamas members. However, it will be their last chance. He's also urged all Palestinians, calling them innocent, and also has asked them to immediately leave the area, warning of potential threat. There's a very long message that Donald Trump has in fact put out on Truth Social. He has called Hamas a ruthless and violent threat for many years in the Middle East. He has in fact pointed to the October 7th massacre in Israel, highlighting that babies, women, children, old people, they all were ready to celebrate. However, their lives were cut short. He's also in fact called for innocent Palestinians to immediately leave the area, in fact, if Hamas does not accept the peace plan. He has also stated that the deal spares the lives of all remaining Hamas fighters, calling them to accept the plan. He has stated that the details of the documents are known to the world, and he has also stated that the US will have peace in the Middle East one way or the other. The violence and bloodshed will stop. He stated that the releasing the hostages is important, including the bodies of those who are dead, and those hostages must be sent back to Israel now. And he stated pointedly that an agreement must be reached by 6 p.m. local time in Washington, D.C. and this is the last chance that the U.S. is giving Hamas. And he said that if this is not done so, all hell like no other will in fact break out against Hamas. He has once again signed his long message stating that there will be peace in Middle East one way or the other. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Jordan Cope. He's an expert on Middle East affairs, joining us from Dallas in Texas. Thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. With, of course, the announcement being made, we do know that the ball has been in Hamas's court since early last week itself. But now Trump coming out, making it very, very clear and setting a deadline for Hamas. We do know that Qatar and Egypt as well, they've been mounting pressure on Hamas leaders to accept this particular deal. Do you think they will go ahead and do so? Or as Trump has said, they won't and hell will break loose?
Interesting when analyzing how the negotiation process has begun. And first, it should be noted that negotiating with terrorists is obviously a very difficult task, that in this round of negotiations, Hamas was actually excluded from the process, and those at the forefront were Egypt and Qatar. Now, Qatar in the past has been accused of sabotaging conditions when it comes to peace deals, and it's also been accused of having tried to act in the best interest of Hamas, a terrorist organization it has given $1.8 billion to since 2012, when it also welcomed its senior leadership into its own sovereign territory to redeem a safe haven. So it's going to be a bit complicated to understand exactly how sincere Qatar is as a mediator and a broker, and to assess its intention to actually see the implementation of the conditions that have been proposed. Donald Trump has been very clear, for the most part, that the conditions in general are non-negotiable. However, Qatar has now essentially clarified that its understanding was slightly different from Trump's, and that certain conditions apparently within the 20 points are up for negotiation, or at least should be. Donald Trump seems to have been very firm on this. And so even though we might be optimistic that many countries around the world have signed on and have given their approval for the 20-point plan, the ultimate question remains with Hamas and whether they, as a terrorist organization, which has broken ceasefire agreements time and time and time again, and whose leadership has made clear that it will commit future October 7 style attacks, it's probably unlikely that Hamas will be faithful to any agreement that it ultimately agrees to. All of this being said, there are militias now rising up in the Gaza Strip, posing Hamas some trouble.
Indeed, and this is a final ultimatum that Donald Trump has presented to Hamas. He's very clear. Earlier, during the joint press briefing, he had stated that he will offer full backing to Netanyahu if Hamas does not accept the deal. And now he's come out and stated twice in his very lengthy message that hell will break loose if Hamas does not accept the conditions. We do know that this plan is very comprehensive. It provides for a technocratic Palestinian leadership to take over once Hamas is disarmed, as well as the creation of a body of peace that Trump and Tony Blair will be heading. How optimistic are you about these, elements of the plan that have been put forth?
I would have to be very skeptical just to begin with, because even with a future technocratic Palestinian government, the question comes into play as to what role the Palestinian Authority will have. And the Palestinian Authority by no means is an angelic organization in and of itself. In recent years, it has devoted over $300 million on an annual basis to subsidize what is called the Pay for Slay Fund, which awards Palestinian terrorists and their families with stipends proportionate to the crimes that they commit and the jail sentences that they serve. So the Palestinian Authority has played a front and row center in sponsoring terrorism in years past. And amongst their leadership is incredible corruption. Yasser Arafat, who headed the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the PA, amassed effectively billions of dollars of undeclared funds under his leadership, perpetuating conflict, defying the Oslo Accords, sponsoring Intifada, sponsoring the murder and death of innocent civilians and future conflict, because what he knew was that by perpetuating conflict, he would receive future foreign aid. Mahmoud Abbas, the current head of the PA, has a net worth of over $100 million, and his thesis subject was in Holocaust denial. And so you have to question, supposedly, why the West is investing so much in the moderates. The Palestinian Authority certainly needs to reform. It might not be as bad as Hamas in terms of the degree and scale of its terrorist attacks that it sponsors, but nonetheless, it's an organization that has very evil inclinations and has proven it throughout the track record of history.
Indeed, that's not all that has taken place. In fact, the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Ishaq Dar, has recently come out and made a very shocking claim. Even as the Gulf Arab nations welcomed this plan, Pakistan also initially welcomed the plan. Ishaq Dar has now stated that the proposal the draft proposal that the Muslim nations received was different than the final document that was put out jointly by Trump and Netanyahu. He has in fact stated, and I'm quoting what he said, that consent was not taken for the final document. How do you think this will go down with the Americans, considering the recent, improvement in ties between US and Pakistan?
First, I just have to think, why is Pakistan so concerned about its involvement in this conflict that is literally hundreds, many hundreds of miles away from its borders? Pakistan literally does not recognize Israel's right to exist, and yet it itself is a product of a quote-unquote two-state solution. It's one of the most hypocritical countries when it comes to foreign policy. It recognizes its right to exist, but it won't recognize Israel's. But all of that point, I guess, aside from now, I wouldn't be surprised if Pakistan were involved in this with the impure intention of trying to sabotage any deal, because at the end of the day, they don't recognize Israel. Many people in its country do support Israel's destruction, and its leadership sponsors and has sponsored, at least has sponsored historically, Islamist terrorism throughout the greater world. And it's no coincidence that anti-Israel rhetoric is now being deployed in a similar manner on state-funded media outlets around the world to condemn India using similar terminology. This is not an isolated movement, oftentimes criticism of Israel is being leveraged by the same people who criticize India for its historic presence in Kashmir. And so one has to be very suspect, especially when it comes to misinformation potentially coming from Pakistan and its allies, whether that be Turkey and Qatar.
All right, sir, I request you to stay on with us as we're tracking further updates.